of South Fremantle for a year. And I think it's almost a natural progression for a lot of surfers from Western Australia, especially from the metro area. Once they get old enough to get mobile, they go 2 hours south.
Yeah.
They head down to the Yellingup, Margaret River area. It's just like it's a wave magnet. It just draws people. So I actually went down there. I hadn't planned it, but I went on a holiday with some kids that I went to school with. Okay, so you can leave school when you're 15. There was one kid who got held down a year, and his birthday was like the 2nd of January. So literally, like fresh out of school, this kid's got his license. And we're like, okay, unreal. Fuck, mate, he had mates overnight.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So we pile in his car and we do a trip down the coast. And I was like, 15 at the time. And we head down there, spend a week surfing, having adventures as young kids do. And then this Twig guy who I was telling you about before, he'd actually already sort of migrated down there a few months earlier, and he'd sort of started a job with Santosha, who went on to become Rusty Australia.
Wow.
Okay, so he was working with them, and there was no promise of a job or anything at that point. It was just like, I'm going to go down and hang out with Twig down south, go stay at his place for a couple of weeks while I'm still on holiday, go surfing with him. So it ends up, I say to my mates, all right, guys, see you later. Thanks a lot. It's been fun hanging out. I'm going to go off to Twig's place now. They drop me off. I got my bag. I got my surfboard. I go knock on Twig's door. Bang, bang, bang. Nobody home. Oh, fuck, what am I going to do? And then I realised I'd left my wallet in the car, in my mate's car, and they'd already drove off back to the city. So there I am. I'm 15 years old. I'm like 200 kilometres away from home. I've got a bag of clothes and a surfboard. And I'm like, fuck, what am I going to do? And I kind of like walked down the beach, and I spent like literally 3 or 4 hours just kind of periodically just going back to this bus. He was living in a bus in a caravan park, knock on the bus door. He's not there. He's still not there. So I go down the beach and I kind of sit there, and I wouldn't say I was crying, but I'd say I was pretty sad.
I'd be crying. I'm going to get home.
Anyway, these couple of girls come down the beach and they start talking to me, and they're kind of like, oh, you look pretty sad, what's going on? And I kind of tell them my story, and they're like, oh, come back and meet our parents, and then they tell their dad the story, and one girl was my age, I think the other girl was like a year younger, and they tell their dad the story, the Foster family. So this girl was like Claire Foster, and they take me back and they explain what went on, and they're like, Dad, can we keep him? And so the Fosters are like, yeah, cool, no problem, and this was like a Friday afternoon, so I kind of hung with the Fosters for the weekend, and they fed me, and they gave me a little place to sleep in their caravan, because they were there on holidays.
They were your foster family.
Yeah. So anyway, come Monday morning, I go to Mr. Foster, I say, Mr. Foster, can you please lend me $10? I'm going to hitchhike to the nearest town, and I'm going to go look for a job. So, I kind of walked up this trail, up to a highway, found a car, bummed a ride, was 8 kilometres to the nearest town where I knew there was a factory. And I wasn't quite sure, I'd never been to this town, and I didn't know if it was the factory where Twig worked or whatever, but kind of cruise in there. I'd sort of seen it on the side of the road. And I walk in, and fair enough, it's the Santosha factory. Nice. I go in, I meet a guy called Mick Button. I'm like, Mick, you got any jobs? And he's like sweating, he's like busting his gut. I mean, you can see he's grinding, right? And he turns around, he says, can you foil fins? Can you make fins? I'm like, yeah, no problem, And then he shows me some fins, and he goes, can you make fins better than these? And I look, and I just laughed. And I mean, they were the shittiest fins I've ever seen. And so I'm like, yep, cool, I can do it. He goes, can you start now? And I'm like, yeah, but can you pay me this afternoon? And so I literally spent like the afternoon working, probably from like midday until like 5:30 in the evening. I made $60.
What?
And I literally hitchhiked back and I said, Mr. Foster, thank you very much. Here's your $10 back.
Wow.
I found a job. I'm moving out. Sorry, guys.
The girls were pretty disappointed, I guess.
Yeah, but we actually stayed friends for a long time. They were pretty cool. And it was always one of those sort of platonic, good friend kind of thing. I mean, like, seriously, they fucking saved me.
It's amazing.
Yeah. So look, I got a job straight away. I was making money. Met another kid who worked in a surf shop nearby, and he said, "Hey, yeah, look, I live in a caravan, and I got a spare bed. You come live with me." And it sort of started there.
Wow, and that's when like the epoxy or
the epoxy thing started a little later, man.
Yeah.
I don't know, kind of.
It was a good journey. It was a nice foray, though.
Yeah,
I liked
I didn't ramble on that one too long.
No. This is you, man. This is all about you.
So I'd been working for Santosha for about a year at that point. So that was like early 84. We're sneaking into late 84. And one of the guys I was working with there, Cole Adams, he would do regular stints overseas shaping. So he'd go to Japan, spend like 4 weeks there, busting boards out, come back. He did a stint in America, in California, and he came back with these boards, He came back with these EPS boards, and they were called Ocean Rhythms. And they came from a guy, there was two guys involved. One was a guy called Clyde Beattie.
Yeah. Very familiar with
And one of the guys, or the guy who shaped them, was a guy called Paul Kuhn.
Yeah.
And I've never ever met Paul again since. But these boards came back, and so they were Ocean Rhythms, epoxy system, SP115. And so Cole brings back these boards, these three boards that are like 1.5 pound EPS core, 2 layers of 6 ounce on the bottom, 3 layers of 6 ounce on the deck. And these things were literally 20% lighter than any PU board I'd ever felt before. And they were unfinished.
Wow.
And so Cole says, "Bert, can you sand these things?" Oh, fuck, what a nightmare. I mean, the shit was like before the introduction of like surfacing agents, epoxy was a nightmare.
Really?
It was kind of like trying to sand lamb. You have to start off with 40 grit and kind of work your way down. Anyway, I sanded these boards, we finished them, we glossed them, and then I went out and rode one, and it was the first time that I ever did, it was the first time in my life I ever did an aerial. It was a backhand aerial, and I did it on an epoxy board. And these things were so lively, they had so much spring. I mean, it was crazy. And these three boards just did the round of that area, and a lot of different people rode them, and I was like just blown away by the liveliness and the sensitivity of these boards. And then literally they all got snapped, and that was the end of that. And, after 3 months, they were all broken, and, just kind of continued on. Then I got a job for, I changed over to another company called H2O. But in the back of my mind, there was always like, oh, these magic boards, this epoxy, it's light, it's strong. You got EPS. I mean, there's other ways you can build boards. I had this little bit of exposure. Get a job with H2O. We're building boards, pumping them out. And I said to Ron, my boss, I said, "Ronnie, remember those boards that Cole bought back, last year? Can we get some epoxy? Can we get some polystyrene? Can we experiment with this stuff?" And then Ron turns around and says to me, "You know what, Bert? I don't have the time, man. I got a business to run. I got to pay bills." He said, "If you want to experiment with this shit, start your own business." And I'm like, ding. Seriously, I would never have even thought of it. And I'm like, wow, Ron, unreal, great idea.
He was like,
I don't know whether that was his intention or what, or if he was trying to give me a reality check. I don't know. Yeah, but essentially he just wasn't interested. You know, he had a business to run. There was a formula. It was a PU blank. It was polyester resin, and that's the way we do it. So before I even started my business, my intention was the pursuit of alternative materials.
Yeah. And then, so let's fast forward a little bit to like, I guess, late 80s, early 90s is when you started figuring out the parabolic stringer.
Yeah, it was more early 90s.
Really?
Well, okay. You're right. It was late 80s.
Give me this. Like, when did that come to you?
I don't know. Sometimes the universe just throws you a bone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Honestly, like, the very boards we build now.
Yeah.
And I'm sure there's people out there. Adam Hill, can you hear me? Steve Rock, can you hear me? There's guys out there that actually own the very two first boards I ever built with parabolic rails. And if you look at those boards and you look at what we build today, everything's in exactly the same place.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, I was like I nailed my first one, but I did build it 1,000 times in my head before I ever made it. And, you know, it's kind of like you have an idea. And like even my job now, like working with Tino, we have a concept for a product we might want to build. And so part of my job is to kind of create the production process, kind of step it out in my mind. How are you going to put this thing together? It's like, okay, we put this layer here, we do this, we add that. I see a problem. Okay, start again. Okay, all right, we shape it first. Then we put this part on and maybe we machine it. Oh, no, I see another problem. And so it's like you can build something in your head.
Yeah.
And you can see a problem before you actually have to actually find the problem in real life. So, yeah.
And you were thinking, put some parabolic, some stringers on the rails instead of the middle. So, like, was that?
Nah, look, it started this way. So it was about 88. I was running my own business. And so now I had to run up to the city like once every couple of weeks and buy foam, buy resin, buy glass, stuff like that. And in the process of like buying raw materials, I was also sort of searching out new material suppliers. So I walk into this one guy's business. His name was Trevor Wright. And he basically supplied the sailboard industry. So in the 80s, we had a thriving sailboard industry in Western Australia. And we had this one guy, he was actually a New Zealand guy. His name was Neil Sheltimer. I think he had a brand called Wind Tech, I think. And there was him and there was a handful of other guys that were building. So I walk into Trevor's business and he's like selling EPS blanks, and he's selling epoxy resin, and he's selling hot wire cut blanks. He would offer to hot wire cut them to the rockers you want, and so on. And so he was basically supplying the sailboard industry. But in his mind, he saw this technology really going somewhere. And so I walked in, and I pick up this giant sailboard made with sandwich construction. So it was basically an EPS core. It had PVC vacuum bagged around it. There was glass under the PVC, glass over, vacuum bagged, carbon fiber. I mean, and this thing was huge, man. It must have been like 200 litres. And it was the lightest, strongest thing I'd ever felt. And it was the next level again, past what I'd seen 3 years earlier with the Clyde Beatty boards. And I said to him straight away, I said, all right, sell me everything I need right now so I can make surfboards like this, because I was just blown away by the lightness and the strength. And basically what they were surf techs.
Yeah.
That's how surf techs were built. EPS core,
it's all based
PVC
off the
sandwich and so on.
Tech.
It just came straight out of the windsurf technology. So I saw that and I started building them, and they were fucking dogs. I'm not lying, eh?
Yeah.
They were just as stiff as fuck.
No life to them.
They just did not flex.
Yeah.
I couldn't really get the weight down. I was sort of struggling. Well, how do I wrap the rails? You know, I can get a sandwich on the top. I can get a sandwich on the bottom.
But it's all roast beef in the middle.
Yeah, and it was like they were really stiff, and I kind of thought, no, this is just not working. So I thought,